What if intelligence is not loud? What if the sharpest minds are not the ones announcing themselves through dominant speed or constant expression, but the ones moving silently beneath the surface of reality, observing patterns most people never realize exist? From childhood, we are conditioned to believe intelligence must look a certain way. Fast answers, bold opinions, academic trophies, verbal confidence. Yet history quietly contradicts this illusion. Some of the most powerful thinkers, innovators, and visionaries were misunderstood, overlooked, or even dismissed during their lives. There is a subtle form of intelligence that does not compete for attention. It does not demand validation. It does not seek control. Instead, it moves inward before it moves outward. It watches reality instead of trying to dominate it. This form of intelligence often feels strange, even lonely to those who carry it. Because when your mind naturally sees beneath surfaces, shallow conversations feel hollow, predictable systems feel limiting, and noise feels exhausting rather than stimulating. What if you've mistaken your quiet nature for weakness? What if what you've been suppressing is not confusion, but a deeper level of perception? Tonight, you're not here to be entertained alone. You're here because something in this title disturbed your sense of identity. And that disturbance is not accidental. High intelligence rarely announces itself in obvious ways because it does not originate from the same impulse that drives performance or visibility. Instead, it emerges from a heightened sensitivity to structure, meaning, and consequence. People with this kind of intelligence often move through the world as if they are tuned to a quieter frequency, one where subtleties carry more weight than spectacle, and where understanding precedes expression. This intelligence operates beneath the surface of behavior. It shapes how someone listens more than how they speak. It alters how situations are interpreted rather than how they are reacted to. While others may be focused on outcomes, recognition, or immediate gratification, the highly intelligent mind is often tracking something less obvious: patterns unfolding over time, emotional dynamics beneath conversation, or invisible cause and effect chains that most people overlook. This creates a distinct internal experience. There is a constant sense that reality is layered, that what is happening outwardly is only one level of what is truly occurring. As a result, highly intelligent individuals tend to approach life with a natural caution, not fear-based, but awareness-based. They are less likely to rush into conclusions, relationships, or beliefs simply because they are popular or socially reinforced. This depth of perception often produces behaviors that seem strange to others. A person may hesitate before responding, not because they lack confidence, but because they are considering multiple interpretations at once. They may withdraw from certain social environments, not due to shyness, but because excessive stimulation fragments their ability to think clearly. They may appear indifferent to trends or status games, because their sense of value is internally generated rather than socially borrowed. There is also a quiet tension that develops when intelligence exceeds the environment that surrounds it. When your mind naturally questions assumptions, notices contradictions, and seeks coherence, shallow explanations begin to feel intolerable. Repetitive conversations drain energy. Predictable narratives feel restrictive. Over time, this creates an instinct to conserve mental resources, to choose depth selectively, rather than distributing attention indiscriminately. This is why highly intelligent people are often mislabeled. Their restraint is mistaken for detachment. Their silence is misread as disengagement. Their preference for observation is interpreted as passivity. In reality, their minds are active, layered, and constantly integrating information across emotional, psychological, and conceptual levels. There is also a mystical dimension to this intelligence, one that science is only beginning to articulate. A heightened awareness often brings an intuitive sensitivity to timing, atmosphere, and emotional undercurrents. You may sense when a situation is unstable long before it collapses. You may feel drawn away from paths that appear successful on the surface but lack internal coherence. You may experience moments of knowing without being able to immediately explain how you know. This does not make life easier. In many ways, it complicates it. Awareness removes comforting illusions. It forces confrontation with ambiguity. It demands responsibility for perception, yet it also grants a form of quiet power, the ability to move through reality without being fully controlled by it. Highly intelligent individuals often learn early that not everything they perceive should be expressed. Not because truth is dangerous, but because timing matters, because understanding cannot be forced, because insight offered too early becomes noise rather than wisdom. So they develop discernment. They learn when to speak, when to wait, and when to let reality reveal itself without interference. This is the invisible current beneath their behavior. It is not detachment from life, but intimacy with its deeper mechanics. Not superiority, but responsibility. Not isolation by choice, but selectivity born from clarity. And this current shapes everything: how they think, how they relate, how they move, and how they quietly navigate a world that often confuses volume with depth. One of the most unsettling experiences of high intelligence is not confusion, but clarity arriving too early. It is seeing connections before they are socially visible, sensing emotional trajectories before they fully form, and understanding outcomes long before others are ready to acknowledge them. This creates an internal strain that is difficult to articulate, because it is not based on imagination, but on perception that has already assembled itself into coherence. There is a quiet loneliness in knowing while still needing to belong. The mind recognizes patterns, yet the social world often operates on consensus rather than accuracy. Speaking too soon risks isolation. Speaking too clearly risks resistance. Speaking honestly can destabilize relationships that rely on shared illusions. Over time, the intelligent mind learns that insight alone does not guarantee connection. So a form of internal negotiation begins. You measure what you see against what can be received. You sense when truth would illuminate and when it would only threaten. This is not manipulation. It is awareness of emotional architecture. People do not resist truth because it is false. They resist it because it arrives before their internal structures are ready to support it. This tension shapes behavior in subtle ways. You may notice that you soften your language instinctively. You may phrase insights as questions rather than statements. You may hold back observations that feel obvious to you, but would feel invasive to others. Not because you doubt yourself, but because you understand that understanding is not transferable at will. This creates a strange dual existence. Internally, your mind is active, layered, often intense. Externally, you may appear calm, restrained, or even disengaged. Others may assume you are indifferent, when in reality you are navigating complexity they do not yet perceive. Belonging for the intelligent mind becomes conditional. It is not about fitting in, but about finding resonance. Superficial harmony feels empty. Forced agreement feels dishonest. Yet total isolation is not the answer either. So you hover between worlds, present but not absorbed, connected but not dissolved. There is also the burden of foresight. When you can sense how dynamics will unfold, you carry information that cannot yet be proven. You may see relationships deteriorating long before conflict appears. You may recognize systemic failures while others celebrate surface success. This awareness does not create superiority, it creates responsibility. Knowing without immediate validation requires emotional discipline. This is why highly intelligent individuals often develop patience that looks like distance. They wait for reality to catch up to what they already see. They allow time to reveal what words cannot convince. They learn that forcing insight only creates resistance, while restraint allows truth to surface naturally. Yet restraint has a cost. It can feel like living with a constant internal compression, where understanding has nowhere to go. Over time, this can produce a subtle fatigue, not of thinking, but of containing thought. Not of emotion, but of regulating expression. And still, the intelligent mind chooses this path. Because it understands something fundamental. Connection built on distortion is not connection at all. Belonging that requires self-erasure is not safety. So instead of betraying perception, the mind adapts. It becomes quieter, sharper, more selective. This is the hidden tension between knowing and belonging. It is not a flaw to be corrected, but a threshold to be navigated. Those who carry it are not broken. They are early. And being early in a world that moves by consensus rather than clarity will always feel like standing slightly ahead of the moment, alone but not lost. At the deepest level, high intelligence is not defined by how much information a person can store, or how quickly they can respond. It is defined by how reality is internally organized. The core difference lies not in speed, but in structure. Not in volume of thought, but in how thought relates to meaning, emotion, time, and consequence. Highly intelligent minds do not experience reality as a flat sequence of events. They experience it as an interdependent system. Actions are not isolated. Words are not neutral. Choices are not singular. Everything exists with a network of cause, implication, and long-term effect. This creates a mode of perception that is fundamentally different from surface-level awareness. Because of this, intelligence expresses itself through behaviors rather than declarations. A person may delay decisions because they are tracking second- and third-order outcomes. They may resist simple explanations because simplicity that ignores complexity feels dishonest. They may seem cautious not because they lack courage, but because they understand that some moves cannot be undone. This is why high intelligence often appears counterintuitive. While others rush toward certainty, the intelligent mind moves toward coherence. While others seek comfort, it seeks alignment. While others chase clarity through answers, it deepens clarity through better questions. One of the most misunderstood aspects of intelligence is its relationship with doubt. Doubt is often framed as weakness, yet in intelligent cognition, doubt is a stabilizing force. It prevents premature conclusions. It keeps perception flexible. It allows the mind to remain responsive rather than rigid. This is not indecision, it is calibration. Another overlooked dimension is emotional integration. High intelligence does not suppress emotion, it contextualizes it. Feelings are examined, not dismissed. Reactions are studied, not obeyed blindly. This creates emotional depth that may not be immediately visible but is profoundly influential. Instead of being ruled by emotion, the intelligent mind learns from it. This integration produces an internal quiet that others may misinterpret. There is less need to externalize thought constantly because much of the processing happens internally. There is less need to dominate conversations because understanding does not require performance. There is less need to defend identity because identity is not built on fragile approval. At a deeper level, intelligence alters one's relationship with time. The present moment is rarely isolated from past patterns or future implications. Decisions feel heavier, not because of anxiety, but because of awareness. This temporal depth can make impulsive behavior feel unnatural. It can also make shallow urgency feel artificial. There is also a mystical dimension that emerges when intelligence reaches a certain depth. Patterns begin to feel symbolic rather than random. Experiences carry layered meaning. Intuition sharpens, not as fantasy, but as pattern recognition operating below conscious articulation. You may sense alignment or misalignment without immediately knowing why. This is where intelligence begins to resemble wisdom. Not moral superiority, but perceptual accuracy. A sensitivity to what sustains and what corrodes, a recognition of unseen structures shaping visible outcomes. Importantly, this kind of intelligence often develops in solitude, not isolation driven by rejection, but solitude chosen for clarity. Silence becomes a tool rather than an absence. Stillness becomes informative. Space allows internal systems to organize themselves without interference. Yet this intelligence does not withdraw from the world entirely. It engages selectively. It values depth over breadth. It invests attention where resonance exists. It understands that energy is finite and attention is sacred. At its core, high intelligence is a form of responsibility. Responsibility for perception. Responsibility for interpretation. Responsibility for action taken with awareness rather than impulse. This responsibility can feel heavy, but it also grants freedom. Freedom from being easily manipulated. Freedom from shallow narratives. Freedom from borrowed identities. This is the truth the entire video orbits around. Intelligence is not something you display. It is something you live inside. It shapes how you move through uncertainty, how you respond to complexity, and how you align with reality rather than fighting it. And once this level of intelligence awakens, it does not seek recognition. It seeks coherence. It seeks truth that can be lived, not merely spoken. And that pursuit quietly transforms everything. If you have lived with this kind of mind, you may have spent years wondering whether something was missing in you, when in truth, something was simply different. From the outside, it may have looked like you were holding back, staying quiet, or moving through life with a certain distance. Internally, however, your experience was full, complex, and often overwhelming in ways you never learned how to explain. You may have noticed early on that you felt older than your age, not in wisdom you could articulate, but in the weight of questions that followed you. While others seemed comfortable moving from moment to moment, you carried a sense that meaning mattered, that direction mattered, that choices echoed further than they appeared. This awareness may have made you cautious when others were carefree, reflective when others were reactive. At times, this difference may have felt like isolation. Conversations that energized others may have left you drained. Social settings that revolved around surface exchange may have felt strangely empty, even when surrounded by people. You may have longed for connection that went beyond familiarity, seeking resonance rather than proximity. You may also have learned to hide parts of yourself, not out of shame, but out of experience. Perhaps when you spoke honestly, you were misunderstood. Perhaps your questions unsettled people who preferred certainty. Perhaps your insights arrived before others were ready to hear them. Over time, silence became safer than explanation. This does not mean you lacked emotion. In fact, it often meant the opposite. You may have felt deeply, even intensely, but expressed selectively. You may have been affected by atmospheres, unspoken tensions, or shifts in mood that others ignored. This sensitivity may have been labeled as overthinking, when it was actually awareness responding to complexity. You may recognize the pattern of being the one others turn to in moments of crisis, even if they overlook you in moments of celebration. Your presence may have offered clarity, grounding, or calm, even when your contributions were subtle. You may have been valued for your steadiness without being fully seen for your depth. There may also be a quiet grief you rarely name, the sense of what could be shared if the world moved at your level of perception. The relationships that might have unfolded differently if understanding had been mutual. The versions of yourself you delayed expressing because the environment could not support them. Yet through all of this, something within you remained intact. You did not lose curiosity. You did not surrender your internal compass. You continued to observe, integrate, and grow, even when external validation was absent. That resilience is not accidental. It is a consequence of intelligence rooted in meaning rather than approval. If this feels familiar, it is because this video is not describing a category. It is reflecting an inner experience you have lived quietly. You are not behind. You are not disconnected. You have been developing inwardly in a world that rewards display over depth. And the fact that you are still here, listening, recognizing yourself in these words, suggests that your intelligence has not been diminished by misunderstanding. It has been refined by it. It is time to recognize that nothing outside of you can fully define the intelligence you carry. The world may measure success by applause, by speed, by visibility, but your mind has always operated in a different dimension, one where subtlety matters more than recognition, where understanding precedes expression, and where alignment is more valuable than agreement. You do not need anyone else to certify your perception. The insights you hold, the patterns you see, the truths you grasp quietly within yourself, they are real, even if unseen. The path of high intelligence is not about proving it to others, it is about knowing it for yourself. It is about holding your internal compass steady, even when the external world seems disoriented. Begin by observing yourself without judgment. Notice how your mind moves, how your awareness tracks patterns others miss, how your understanding unfolds over time. Recognize that these faculties are not burdens to be hidden. They are gifts that have guided you silently through complexity. This is not about arrogance. It is about recognition. It is about naming the reality you have already been living. Pay attention to the places where your perception has been restrained, where you held back your thoughts, withheld your questions, or delayed your insights because the environment could not receive them. Understand that this restraint was not failure, it was preparation. It allowed your intelligence to grow without distortion, to refine itself before being applied in the wider world. Now allow yourself to step inward. Trust the patterns your mind has discerned. Listen to the subtle currents that guide your intuition. Notice the questions that rise before answers form. Honor your need for space and reflection, because these are not signs of weakness. They are signals of depth. The world may move fast, but your mind has always been tuned to a longer, more intricate rhythm. This is the awakening of quiet power. It is not visible, not performative, not loud. It is the understanding that your presence, your mind, and your perception are already influencing reality, even when unnoticed. Each decision you make from awareness, each insight you trust without external validation, each act of alignment with your inner truth. These are the steps that gradually shape a world around you that resonates with the intelligence you embody. You do not need to force change or seek permission. The awakening is internal. It is the recognition that your mind has always been listening, sensing, integrating, and adapting, and now you can consciously guide that force. Begin to act intentionally, not out of reaction, not for approval, but in alignment with what you perceive as true. And as you do this, you will feel something subtle shift, a quiet empowerment that does not demand attention, a sense of harmony that does not require consensus, and knowing that the intelligence you have carried silently is in fact your guide, your ally, your hidden strength. This is the call to awakening. Not a dramatic call to arms, not a demand for transformation, but a gentle invitation. Recognize yourself, trust yourself, align yourself. Let the intelligence that has quietly guided you emerge in ways that honor both your depth and your presence in the world. And now, after tracing the hidden pathways of perception, the subtle currents of thought, and the behaviors that quietly reveal intelligence, you return to yourself. You see that this journey was never about learning something new, but about remembering what has always been true within you. The awareness that has guided your steps, shaped your choices, and defined your inner world is not borrowed from the outside. It has always been yours, quietly present, quietly alive. The signs of genius, the strange tendencies, the restraint, the patience, the depth, they were not obstacles, nor were they anomalies. They were markers along a path that only those who perceive deeply can follow. Each silent observation, each carefully weighed decision, each inward movement was a thread in a hidden tapestry, one that you have been weaving unconsciously, yet with intention, from the very beginning. There is a subtle kind of power in this recognition. It does not shout, it does not demand attention. It moves through life with a quiet inevitability, altering the world not through force, but through alignment with truth. You are beginning to understand that intelligence is not a measure of what is seen, but of what is perceived, understood, and applied beyond the visible. And as you stand in this awareness, you realize that the world you inhabit is not fixed. Its boundaries, its rules, its rhythms, they are flexible to the mind that observes them with clarity. The patterns that once seemed chaotic or confusing are now threads you can follow. The relationships that felt discordant or frustrating are now mirrors reflecting the depth of your own discernment. Reality itself is no longer something external. It is something you navigate, shape, and engage with consciously. In this quiet knowing, you feel an echo of something ancient, a recognition that intelligence, perception, and awareness are not commodities to be shown, but gifts to be inhabited. They are not tools for comparison, but instruments for understanding. The strange behaviors, the solitude, the careful observation, the patience, they are not marks of being apart. They are marks of being awake. And so you return to yourself full circle, not changed by instruction, but reminded by reflection. Not transformed by spectacle, but awakened by recognition. There is no final answer, no end point. The mind continues to observe, to sense, to integrate. The subtle genius within you moves forward silently, inevitably, and always aligned with the hidden currents of life. Stay with that awareness. Let it move through your choices, your perceptions, your actions. Let it guide you without fanfare, without urgency, without the need for external acknowledgement. This is not just intelligence, it is presence. It is mastery over perception, over depth, over the unseen forces shaping your life. And as you inhabit it fully, the world shifts, not because it must, but because it always responds to clarity, attention, and alignment. You have returned, not to what is visible, but to what is real, not to what is applauded, but to what is true. And in that quiet, subtle truth lies the essence of genius, the kind that is not noticed, yet shapes everything.